Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're exploring something that is, honestly, just absolutely profound, the neurology of identity. We're going to be looking through the lens of Oliver Sacks's famous clinical tales to see exactly how the human brain fights tooth and nail to preserve its sense of self when faced with severe biological fractures. We so often think of brain injury as just a passive loss of function, but as we're going to discover, it is so much more than that. It's an active, deeply human struggle for existential meaning. So let's just jump right into this. I want you to imagine a reality where you can no longer recognize human beings. Imagine looking around a room and instead of seeing familiar faces, your perceptual screen just shows fragmented, meaningless geometric data. You see lines, you see shapes, colors, but that coherent meaning that ties it all together into a person or an object, it's completely gone. How would you navigate the world? How would you hold on to who you are? Well, this brings us to the bizarre, mind-bending mystery of Dr. P. This is a very famous clinical observation of visual agnosia. Now, Dr. P was a highly gifted, intellectually sophisticated musician. Yet during a clinical examination, he literally reached out, grabbed his wife's head, and tried to lift it onto his own head to wear as a hat. I mean, think about that. For Dr. P, the visual world had completely dissolved. And this isn't just a quirky anecdote. It is a profound rupture in how the brain processes reality. And this case? It's a massive paradigm shift in how we view the brain. We're moving away from classical neurology, which basically looks at pathology as a passive loss, right? Just a simple deficit like amnesia or aphasia. Instead, we're stepping into the neurology of identity. This framework views neurological illness not just as a mechanical breakdown, but as an active, resilient attempt by the individual to reorganize their lived experience. It's really about the fight to stay human when your hardware starts to fail. All right, let's move into our first major area, compensating for neurological losses, or the dimension of deficits. To really grasp how the mind bridges the gap when things break down, we have to understand what exactly is being lost. Take proprioception, our sixth sense. This is that automatic awareness of where our body parts are in space. Imagine losing that entirely. That is exactly what happened to Christina, who became known as the disembodied woman. Without proprioception, she literally lost the feeling of possessing her own physical body. But here is the absolutely fascinating part. How these patients fought back against these devastating losses. When Dr. P couldn't use his vision to structure reality anymore, he developed what Sacks called body music. He sang while dressing, sang while eating. Music literally became the alternative framework holding his life together. Christina, without her sixth sense, forced her vision to compensate. She intensely monitored her every single movement just to reclaim control over her body. And then there's Jimmy G. Take Jimmy G, the lost sailor. A severe vitamin B1 deficiency completely wiped out his short-term memory, leaving him entirely trapped in a fractured present. Sacks evocatively described him as living in a moat of oblivion, where every new experience vanished instantly. But, and this is key, even within that moat, Jimmy wasn't totally lost. During spiritual rituals in the chapel, he found profound inner coherence. His memory had completely disintegrated, sure, but he actively sought out an alternative way to preserve his selfhood through spiritual attentiveness. Moving on to our next section, harnessing dangerous wellness, the dimension of excesses. Now, pathology isn't always about losing something. Sometimes it's an absolute explosion of energy. Sacks called this phenomenon dangerous wellness. This is a state where illness actually generates an overflowing, almost artificial sense of vitality and impulse. Think of patients with Tourette syndrome, which is associated with excessive dopamine activity. From a purely clinical standpoint, that heightened arousal is a pathology, but the human spirit can do incredible things with that overflow. Consider Ray. He had severe Tourette syndrome, but he didn't just suffer from these sudden physical tics. He actually integrated that excess energy right into his personality. Ray was a jazz drummer, and he managed to transform his wild, sudden tics into the brilliant, unpredictable core rhythm of his improvisations. He even used his rapid, unpredictable reflexes to become an exceptional table tennis player. He took a pathological excess and converted it into a completely unique talent. Ray's story is just incredible because it suggests that our human identity isn't just the product of a smoothly running normal brain. It's the result of how we narrate our lives, using whatever fragmented pieces our brain gives us. Ray transcended his illness to achieve what Nietzsche called great health. That's a kind of psychological resilience born exactly out of pain and neurological difference. He didn't just survive Tourette's, He used it to build a highly vibrant life. Next up, we have gateways to inner experience, the dimension of transport. So, biological abnormalities, especially those in the temporal lobe, can actually transport people to totally different emotional landscapes. Look at the case of Mrs. O.C. Due to temporal lobe seizures, she started repeatedly hearing these incredibly vibrant, vivid Irish songs playing perfectly in her mind. Now, a strict reductionist would look at her brain scan and confidently tell you these songs are just a meaningless symptom, right? Just a random misfiring of neurons. But Sachs saw it differently. To him, these melodies weren't random noise. They functioned as bridges. They reconnected Mrs. O'Con with her childhood and with deeply buried emotional experiences. The pathology literally transported her to profound inner experience that had been lost to time. It just goes to show that even a biological glitch can hold immense personal value. All right, let's look at concrete modes of cognition, the world of the simple. Society usually places all its bets on abstract cognition, right? Mechanical logic, algorithms, scoring well on traditional IQ tests. But Sachs drew a really fascinating distinction here. He showed that we don't only think in algorithms. There's also concrete cognition, which is all about engaging the world through vivid images, emotional symbols, and narratives. And Sachs proved that this concrete cognition isn't inferior or broken. It is a remarkably rich, totally valid alternative way of existing. Let's look at Rebecca and Jose. Rebecca had a low IQ and failed all those traditional logic tests, so the medical world viewed her as fundamentally deficient. But when mechanical logic failed her, she structured her life using poetic symbols. She found incredible existential meaning through nature and theater as a true narrative being. Then there's Jose, an autistic savant. He engaged with the world by recreating his lived experiences through intensely vivid, emotionally infused drawings. Both of them show the incredible resilience of alternative cognition. And that brings us to our conclusion, the neurology of identity. Ultimately, what Sachs's clinical tales teach us is that a damaged brain does not just equal a meaningless life. Far from it. Actually, it's in these very moments of severe biological rupture, when the visual world dissolves, when memory vanishes, or when energy overflows, that our capacity for adaptation and creativity is most clearly revealed. We aren't static programs. We are ongoing narratives, continually rewriting ourselves. Sure, on one level, the brain is a biological machine. It runs on algorithms, and yes, it is absolutely susceptible to physical damage, deficits, and chaotic excesses. But it's our active use of memories, of symbols, of stories, and our relentless effort to preserve our identity that transforms that fragile biological machine into a complete human being. So I want to leave you with this. Take a second to really think about the sheer adaptability of your own mind. If your identity isn't just a fixed script, but an ongoing narrative forged through challenges, fractures, and adaptations, how are you writing your story today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring the fascinating narrative of your own mind.